In a world where headlines often highlight human cruelty and indifference, a gorilla named Binti Jua cradled an injured boy with a tenderness that transcended species. This act wasn't taught, it was felt. Welcome to 10 Times Animals Proved. They're better than humans, where we explore moments that challenge our understanding of compassion. Deep in the lush jungles of northern Thailand, a young elephant named May Perm was born into a life meant for joy, play, and freedom. But destiny had other plans. At just a few years old, she was captured by poachers and sold into the elephant tourism industry, one of the darkest underbellies of the travel world. Chained, beaten, and forced to carry tourists for hours each day under the scorching sun, May Perm's body began to break down. Her spirit dimmed. The man who trained her, known only as Somchai, used cruel tactics, sticks with nails, hot irons, and starvation. It was a brutal method known as fajan, or the crush, a process meant to break an elephant's will. And it worked. For years, May Perm lived in silence. She obeyed, she endured, and she remembered. Elephants never forget, and May Perm never did. One rainy morning, the chains came off, not because of kindness, but because May Perm could no longer walk. Her knees were swollen, her back deformed, and she was of no more use to the industry. But fate had more in store. That was when a group of local animal rights activists, led by a woman named Lek Chyler, stepped in. Known for her work rescuing abused elephants, Lek convinced the owners to hand over May Perm. It took a flatbed truck, a custom-built ramp, and several hours of gentle coaxing. But eventually, May Perm was taken to the Elephant Nature Park, a sanctuary nestled in a remote valley surrounded by mountains, rivers, and safety. For the first time in over 30 years, May Perm was free. Years passed. May Perm thrived. She made friends, especially with another elderly elephant named Jokia. They walked side by side, shared food, and even leaned on each other when resting. But then, something unimaginable happened. One day, a group of volunteers arrived to help at the sanctuary. Among them was Somchai, the very man who had once tortured May Perm. No one knew at first. He had taken a job through a volunteer network, claiming to want to change his life and make peace with the animals. When Lek discovered who he was, she was furious. She confronted him, but he insisted he wasn't there to harm, only to help. He broke down in tears, admitting what he had done and asking to atone. Lek hesitated but allowed him to stay under close supervision. Everyone held their breath when Somchai approached May Perm. He moved slowly. No sticks, no chains, just a small bucket of watermelons. May Perm saw him, stared. She paused. Her body tensed. Then, she stepped forward, one foot, then another. Then in a moment that silenced everyone, May Perm gently touched Somchai's shoulder with her trunk. She didn't charge. She didn't walk away. She reached out and forgave. Tears streamed down Somchai's face. He knelt and whispered apologies only she could hear. From that day on, he stayed at the sanctuary, never missing a day. He cleaned, fed, built shelters, not out of guilt, but out of a sense of redemption. May Perm passed away peacefully, too, years later. Somchai held her trunk as she took her final breath. Her story didn't just change him, it changed everyone who heard it. In the bustling streets of Tokyo, a university professor named Ueno Hidesaburo adopted a fluffy Akita puppy. He named him Hachiko, or Hachi for short. Every morning, Hachi would walk Ueno to the Shibuya train station. And every afternoon at 3 p.m. sharp, Hachi would return to greet him. It became a ritual. Locals began to notice the pair, the loyal dog with bright eyes and curled tail waiting patiently outside the station. Rain, shine, or snow, they were inseparable. until one day, everything changed. On a chilly May afternoon in 1925, Professor Ueno left for work. As usual, Hachi followed him to the station, watched him board the train, and trotted home. But that afternoon, the professor never returned. He had suffered a sudden brain hemorrhage and died at work. No one told Hachi, but somehow he knew something was wrong. At 3 p.m., he went to the station. He sat. He waited. No train brought his master home. The next day, he returned. Then again, and again, and again. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. For 10 years, Hachiko returned to that same spot every single afternoon. He endured cold winters, brutal storms. He was fed scraps by local vendors and watched over by sympathetic station workers. To some, he was just a stray. But to others, he was a legend. Soon, his story spread across Japan. He became a national symbol of loyalty. Children read books about him. Strangers came just to see the dog who would not forget. He wasn't waiting out of habit. He was waiting out of love. In 1935, Hachiko was found lying peacefully in the exact same spot he had waited for so many years. Even death didn't keep him from his duty. A statue now stands at the Shibuya station, not just of a dog, but of an ideal, a reminder that devotion knows no species. Humans forget. They move on. They break promises. But Hachi, he remembered. He waited. He loved, without asking for anything in return. In a world of fleeting commitments, Hachiko showed us what it means to truly stand by someone, even when they're gone. It began like any ordinary dive. Nan Hauser, a marine biologist with over 3 decades of experience, had entered the crystal waters off the Cook Islands to study the behaviors of humpback whales. The sea was calm, visibility was perfect, and the silence underwater gave her that familiar comfort she had always found in the ocean. Nothing seemed unusual until a giant shadow approached from the deep. At first, she thought it was just one of the whales she was observing. It moved slowly, elegantly, its massive form gliding effortlessly through the water. But something was different. The whale wasn't just swimming by, it was circling her, closer and closer. Nan instinctively reached out, feeling the grooved texture of its skin. The whale brushed against her, not once but several times, pushing her with what seemed to be deliberate force. To a casual observer, it may have appeared aggressive, even threatening, but Nan knew better. The whale wasn't attacking, it was shielding her. As she was pushed through the water, the whale tucked her under its massive pectoral fin. Then came the flick of its tail, circling again, this time more urgently. Nan struggled to understand what was going on. She had never seen this behavior before, and certainly never directed at a human. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it, a shape slicing through the blue. It was a tiger shark, and it was headed directly for her. Nan's breath caught in her throat. The shark was big, at least 15 feet, and it was too close for comfort. But the whale remained between her and the threat. Again and again it pushed her, maneuvering her away from the predator. What had first seemed like strange behavior suddenly made sense. The whale had seen the danger before she had, and it had acted to protect her. In that moment, Nan Hauser felt an emotion she never thought possible in such a situation. Trust. Complete, unshakable trust in this enormous creature who had taken it upon itself to act as her guardian. The whale even went so far as to lift her out of the water on its back, nudging her toward the surface and closer to her boat. Once aboard, Nan watched as the whale remained nearby, circling and keeping watch until the shark finally lost interest and disappeared. The entire encounter was recorded. Her team's cameras captured it all. Marine experts were stunned. The scientific community had no precedent for this. While whales had been seen intervening to protect seals from orcas, no one had ever documented one stepping in to save a human from a shark. And yet, there it was. Proof of an unspoken connection, an instinct of empathy that defied logic. But the question remained. Why? Nan believed and still believes that the whale recognized her as vulnerable, that it acted not out of instinct for its own kind, but out of a deeper moral intuition, a willingness to protect a being from another species simply because it could. Some called it coincidence. Others called it a miracle. But for Nan Hauser, it was a moment of pure, undeniable grace. A gift from an animal who owed her nothing and chose to save her anyway. And in that moment, she realized something profound. Sometimes when faced with danger, it's not human kindness that saves us. It's the kindness of the wild. Thousands of miles away, in a completely different world, another remarkable tale of animal heroism was unfolding, not beneath the ocean's surface, but in the crumbling alleyways of a quiet residential neighborhood. It began with a cry. At first, no one thought much of it. Residents of the small apartment building on the city's edge were used to the sounds of stray cats meowing in the night. The streets were full of them, abandoned pets, feral kittens, survivors of a world that often forgot them. But this cry, it was different. It was insistent, desperate. It didn't stop. Every night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., a white and gray tabby appeared outside the building's back stairwell. She would pace, meow, and paw frantically at the lower basement window. Her eyes wide, her tail stiff. Neighbors grew annoyed. Some threw shoes, others banged on their windows. But she never left. Eventually, a young woman named Lena, a recent college graduate who had just moved in, took notice. Unlike the others, she didn't try to shoo the cat away. Something about the animal's behavior unsettled her. It wasn't just hungry meowing. It was purposeful, almost like the cat was trying to tell someone something. One cold November night, Lena decided to investigate. She descended the back stairwell and found the cat waiting, as always, pawing at the narrow, dust-covered basement window. Curious, Lena kneeled down, wiped the glass clean, and pressed her ear against it. That's when she heard it. Faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. A baby's cry. Lena's heart dropped. She rushed back upstairs and called emergency services. Within minutes, the fire department arrived, pried open the locked basement door, and descended into the pitch-black storage area below the building. In the far corner, behind a stack of broken furniture and discarded boxes, they found an abandoned duffel bag. Inside was a newborn baby, barely 2 days old, wrapped in a bloodied towel, weak but alive. The authorities were stunned. They rushed the infant to the hospital where doctors confirmed the baby would survive. Malnourished, cold, but incredibly saved just in time. If Lena hadn't listened, if the cat hadn't called out, the baby might not have survived the night. As news of the discovery spread, the neighborhood's perception of the stray cat changed overnight. No longer was she a nuisance. She was a hero. They named her Clara. Police later confirmed that the baby had been left there by a teenage mother in crisis. She had panicked and hidden the child, intending to return, though it was unclear if she ever would have. Clara, the cat who had no home, no family, and no voice of her own in the human world, had done what no one else did. She saw, she heard, and she spoke up in the only way she knew how. Clara was adopted by Lena, who kept her by her side from that day on. The baby, later named Hope by her new adoptive family, grew up hearing the story of the cat who saved her life. What drove Clara to act? Why did a creature that had known only neglect and abandonment show such empathy, such persistence, It wasn't training. It wasn't instinct. It was something deeper. An awareness. A soul, and perhaps a belief, whether conscious or not, that every life matters, even the tiniest one hidden in the dark. These two stories, of a whale in the depths of the sea and a cat in the forgotten corners of a city, remind us that heroism wears many faces. It doesn't always roar or shine in the spotlight. Sometimes it swims silently beside us, protecting us before we even know we're in danger. Sometimes it meows beneath a basement window, refusing to give up until help arrives. And sometimes it's not humanity that saves the day. It's the wild, the quiet, the unnoticed, the ones we call animals, and in those moments, they prove, once again, that compassion doesn't belong to us alone. In the concrete jungle of Cincinnati, where fences and moats separate wild animals from the visiting crowds, a tragedy nearly unfolded until something astonishing happened. It was May 28, 2016, a hot Saturday afternoon at the Cincinnati Zoo, and the gorilla exhibit was crowded with curious families, snapping photos and marveling at the giant silverback gorillas lounging in their enclosure. Among the visitors was a 3-year-old boy named Isaiah. He clung to the railings, his eyes wide with wonder, asking his mother if he could go swim with the gorillas. She, distracted for a moment by another child, turned her head, just long enough. Isaiah slipped away, climbed the barrier, and fell, 14 feet, down into the moat, into the world of Harambe. Harambe, a 17-year-old silverback gorilla, weighed over 400 pounds and had strength that could snap a human in two. Within seconds, the crowd erupted in screams. Some gasped, some cried. Others raised their phones to film. The boy lay motionless in the shallow water, dazed from the fall. Harambe approached, towering over him, his muscles rippling with power. Zoo staff rushed toward the exhibit, but they had no way of entering quickly. The visitors' footage captured it all, what looked like a terrifying scene of a wild animal, dragging a helpless child through water. But if you watch closely, you'll see something else. Harambe didn't attack. He didn't harm the child. In fact, he stood over Isaiah protectively. He gently touched his back. At one point, he even seemed to push away other curious gorillas. For nearly 10 minutes, Harambe stayed close to the boy, alert, watchful, unsure of what to do with the chaos unfolding above. The zoo staff, fearing for the child's life, made a devastating decision. A zookeeper raised a rifle and fired a single shot. Harambe fell instantly, dead. The child was rescued unharmed, but the world exploded. The footage went viral. Debates raged. Was Harambe a hero or a threat? Could more have been done to save both lives? Experts analyzed the gorilla's behavior and found something telling. Harambe hadn't shown aggression. In fact, he had displayed signs of confusion and, some said, concern. Gorillas, especially silverbacks, are known to protect their young. And to Harambe, perhaps Isaiah was just that, a fragile child in need of guarding. A similar incident happened in 1996 at the Brookfield Zoo in Illinois. A 3-year-old boy also fell into a gorilla enclosure. But instead of panic, a female gorilla named Binti Jua scooped up the unconscious boy, cradled him in her arms, and carried him to the zookeeper entrance. She handed the child over. Calm, gentle, motherly. The boy survived, and Binti was hailed a hero. Why do these animals show compassion for children who aren't their own? What drives a 400-pound creature, capable of unthinkable power, to shield a child rather than harm him? Science offers some theories: maternal instinct, social bonding behaviors, a sensitivity to vulnerability. But beyond science, there is something else, a sense of morality, an understanding of right and wrong that transcends species. Harambe's story didn't end the way anyone wanted. But what we do know is this. When a child lay helpless and alone, it wasn't a human who stood by him. It was a gorilla, and that matters. Now, journey with me to a dusty roadside in Russia, where another animal would demonstrate loyalty and love in a way that few humans ever would. It was a warm afternoon in Saratov, a small Russian city surrounded by fields and forests. A man named Andrei, a former soldier, was out walking with his dog Rex, a 2-year-old German shepherd with amber eyes and a soldier's discipline. Andrei had rescued Rex from a shelter just a year earlier. The bond between them was immediate. Rex never left his side, following commands with perfect precision and sleeping by his door every night. On this particular afternoon, Andrei took Rex to the local store. As he stepped inside, he tied Rex to a pole outside. It was just for a moment, but that moment changed everything. Inside the store, a robbery was unfolding. 2 masked men, armed and nervous, had been casing the place for days. They hadn't planned for a customer to walk in just then. One of the robbers panicked, pointing his gun at Andrei. A struggle broke out. From outside, Rex heard the commotion and then the gunshot. Rex snapped his leash. He burst through the door and lunged at the first man he saw holding a weapon. In a blur, Rex clamped down on the robber's arm, dragging him to the floor. The second man raised his gun and fired, once, then twice. Rex yelped and collapsed, but he didn't let go. Even as blood soaked into the floor, Rex held tight, his jaws locked like a vice. The robbers fled, leaving their weapons behind. When police and medics arrived minutes later, they found Andrei wounded, but alive, and Rex barely breathing. The dog had taken 2 bullets for his owner. Rex was rushed to the nearest vet hospital, where surgeons worked for hours to remove the bullets and stabilize him. The story made national news. Donations poured in. Strangers sent messages of love and gratitude. Andrei visited him every day, speaking softly to his best friend, promising him a full recovery. And Rex, he survived. Not just survived, thrived. Weeks later, he was walking again, tail wagging, proudly bearing the scars of a hero. People asked why he did it. Why would a dog risk his life, charging into danger, unafraid of bullets? But anyone who's ever loved a dog already knows the answer. Because dogs don't hesitate. Because love, real, unconditional love, doesn't come with fine print or second thoughts. Andrei later said with tears in his eyes, Rex didn't see a gun. He saw me in danger, and that was enough. These aren't just stories of animals being brave. These are stories of animals making choices, choosing to protect, to shield, to defend, even when it means risking their own lives. A gorilla, confused and overwhelmed, still places himself between a child and danger. A dog, trained in obedience but driven by love, dives into gunfire without a second's pause. Would every human do the same? Could every human do the same? Sometimes the creatures we consider less evolved, less important, less aware, show us what real humanity looks like. And they don't need words. Their actions speak. For them, Harambe and Rex both remind us of a simple truth. Compassion is not a human invention. Courage does not require a human heart. And loyalty runs deeper than species, deeper than training, deeper than fear. So the next time someone calls animals, just animals, remember the boy in the moat, remember the bullets in Rex's side, and remember that sometimes animals are not only like us, they are better than us. We often think of animals as silent companions, charming, affectionate, maybe even protective, but every now and then a story emerges that shatters those expectations. A story where an animal doesn't just show kindness or loyalty, but insight, an almost psychic sensitivity, something uncanny, something that defies explanation. This chapter begins in a small hospice in Providence, Rhode Island, a simple, quiet facility where patients spend their final days surrounded by dignity and care, and a cat. His name was Oscar. He wasn't a therapy animal, he wasn't trained. He just showed up one day at Steerhouse Nursing and Rehabilitation, Center, a shelter cat. Quiet, dignified, watchful. From the moment Oscar arrived, the staff noticed something strange about him. He wasn't particularly social. He didn't curl up with just anyone. In fact, most days he wandered the halls alone until someone was about to die. Oscar would walk into a room and leap onto a patient's bed. He would curl up against their side, sometimes placing his head on their hand or chest. Within hours, every time, the patient would pass away. At first, the nurses thought it was coincidence, but as the pattern repeated, over 20, then 30, then 50 times, they realized something profound was happening. Oscar knew, before even the doctors or nurses did. Before any machines registered a change, before families arrived to say goodbye, Oscar's presence became both a comfort and a signal. When he entered a room and stayed, staff would call the patient's loved ones, and they always arrived just in time. Dr. David Dosa, a geriatrician at the hospice, wrote about Oscar in the New England Journal of Medicine and later in a book titled Making Rounds with Oscar. He described the cat's accuracy as near perfect. But how? Some theorized that Oscar could smell biochemical changes in a dying person, subtle shifts that no human could detect. Others believed he picked up on breathing patterns or energy fluctuations. Whatever the reason, one truth remained. Oscar provided something medicine could not. Comfort, closure, a silent, warm presence at the final chapter of life. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. But he gave patients something no machine ever could: company in their last moments. In his own quiet way, Oscar gave people what so many of us forget to give each other: presence. Now let's go to the icy waters off the coast of Rarotonga in the Cook Islands. The ocean was clear, calm, beautiful, and filled with predators. Marine biologist Nan Hauser had been studying whales for over 30 years. That day, she was swimming with a group of humpbacks, peaceful giants. She had done this countless times before, observing, filming, documenting. But this time, something was different. One of the humpbacks, a massive male nearly 50 feet long, began acting strangely. He swam toward her, not gently, not calmly, but quickly, deliberately. Nan barely had time to react before the whale pressed its massive head against her body. She tried to swim away. The whale followed. It nudged her, again and again, with increasing urgency. At one point, it even tucked her under its pectoral fin, shielding her with its massive body. Nan was terrified. She thought she was being attacked. She had never seen this behavior before. The whale spun, blocking her path again and again, pushing her toward the surface. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A tiger shark, huge, circling, predatory. Only then did she understand. The whale wasn't attacking her, he was protecting her. For over 10 minutes, the whale shielded Nan from the shark, guiding her gently back toward her boat. Only when she was safely aboard did the whale retreat, watching her for a moment, then vanishing into the deep. Nan wept. She later described it as the most profound moment of her life. "I've spent my career trying to understand these creatures," she said, "and now one had just saved my life. But this wasn't an isolated event. Marine biologists have documented other cases of humpback whales intervening. When predators threaten vulnerable animals, seals, dolphins, even other whales. It's called altruistic behavior, actions that benefit others at a cost to oneself. But why? Whales don't get anything from protecting a human, or a seal, or another whale's calf. They don't expect gratitude. They don't post it on Instagram. They just do it. Because something inside them recognizes danger, and something deeper inside compels them to help. It's not a reflex, it's a choice. And that's what makes it extraordinary. A whale doesn't have to love a human to save them. It just has to care. From the gentle paws of a hospice cat to the enormous fins of a guardian whale, These stories force us to ask one thing: how much do animals really understand? Science has long struggled with this question. We measure intelligence by what we can observe: problem solving, tool use, communication. But what about empathy? What about a sense of morality? When Oscar curls up beside a dying patient, when a whale shields a diver from a shark, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? Are they following instinct or something higher? When you look at these animals, it's impossible not to feel a sense of awe. Not just at their actions, but at the spirit behind them. Because what Oscar and the whale remind us is this: kindness doesn't need a reason. You don't have to speak the same language to offer comfort. You don't have to be the same species to save a life. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all: compassion doesn't belong to humans alone. In a world that sometimes feels cold and indifferent, it's the animals, silent, observant, often overlooked, who remind us how to care. Truly, deeply, selflessly, these are not just outliers, not just amazing animal stories. These are moments that expose a profound truth: that in our search to be more human, we might do well to be a bit more like them. So the next time someone tells you animals are beneath us, less intelligent, less worthy, tell them about Oscar. Tell them about the whale, and ask them this: when was the last time you comforted a stranger as they died? When was the last time you risked your life for someone without asking anything in return? Because some animals don't just share our world, they elevate it. In a world where news headlines are often dominated by violence, betrayal, and self-interest, it's easy to feel disillusioned. It's easy to believe that compassion is rare, that heroism is reserved for fairy tales. But then along comes a creature that challenges all those assumptions, an animal whose actions speak louder than our doubts. This chapter begins in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia. It was a warm afternoon in 2017 when a young boy named Noah and his siblings were playing in the front yard. The family's German shepherd, House, was watching them closely. Ever since being adopted, House had shown an unusually calm and watchful presence, especially around the kids. He wasn't just a pet, he was a guardian. What happened next could have been tragic, but it wasn't, because of House. Out of the woods slithering behind the house came something silent, fast, and deadly. A rattlesnake. Specifically, an eastern diamondback, the largest and most venomous rattlesnake in North America. It was heading straight for Noah. In an instant, House threw himself between the snake and the child. He didn't bark. He didn't wait. He lunged forward and took the bite. Then he took another. And another. 3 bites, each one loaded with venom. House stood his ground. When the family realized what had happened, they rushed him to the vet. His leg was already swelling, his breathing labored. The venom was doing its job, destroying tissue, shutting down organs. But the doctors acted quickly, flooding his system with anti-venom. House clung to life for days, his body battered, but his heart unyielding. He made it through. The story went viral. People from all over the world donated to his medical care. The vet staff said they had never seen anything like his bravery or his resilience. Why did he do it? He could have run. He could have retreated. But he didn't. He chose to stand between a child and death. And in doing so, House reminded us of something many people forget. Loyalty isn't about words. It's about action. And sometimes it means taking the hit so someone else doesn't have to. Now we cross the world, to a different setting, a zoo in Brookfield, Illinois. The year was 1996, and the animal at the heart of this story wasn't a dog. It was a gorilla. Her name was Binti Jua. She was a western lowland gorilla, 8 years old, born and raised in captivity. Like many gorillas in zoos, she had a calm, majestic presence, but was never trained for rescue or care. That didn't stop her. On August 16th, a 3-year-old boy climbed over the barrier and fell nearly 20 feet into the gorilla enclosure. The Veop crowd screamed. People panicked. The boy lay unconscious, bleeding, limbs twisted. 7 adult gorillas stood nearby. Binti Jua walked toward him. No one knew what she would do. After all, gorillas are immensely strong. A single strike could kill. But what happened next left even the most seasoned zookeepers speechless. Binti knelt beside the child, examined him gently, then picked him up. Cradling him in her arms, she carried him across the enclosure to a service door. Then she placed him down gently and backed away, waiting. When zoo staff arrived, she remained calm, never aggressive. She had done her job. She had saved a human life. The boy survived. The doctors later said he would have died without her intervention. But what was even more astonishing was the why. Why would a gorilla with no training, raised in captivity, save a human child? Many experts pointed to maternal instinct. Binti had a baby of her own with her during the incident, riding on her back. But others suggested something deeper: empathy. Gorillas, like humans, have been observed mourning their dead, comforting one another, even showing signs of joy, grief, and understanding. When Binti saw that child, something in her recognized the fragility of his body, the urgency of the moment, and she responded, not with aggression, not with indifference, but with kindness. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't a scripted scenario. There was no reward, no trainer, no prompting. It was instinct. No, not just instinct. It was compassion. In both stories, the German Shepherd and the gorilla, we see a pattern that keeps repeating throughout nature. Animals not only recognize danger, they also choose to act. They make decisions based not just on survival, but on morality. Yes, you heard that right. There's growing research that animals, especially mammals, possess what scientists are beginning to call moral emotions. Not just instincts, but feelings like fairness, empathy, protection of the weak, even grief and remorse. So when House stepped in front of that snake, or when Binti carried that child, they weren't just reacting, they were choosing to protect the vulnerable. Choosing to value life, even across species. Now let's flip the mirror around. What would you do? If you saw a stranger in danger, would you leap forward without thinking? Would you risk your own life to save theirs? Many people like to think they would, but time and again it's animals, not humans, who prove they don't hesitate. They don't need to weigh options. They don't need applause. They act. And in that moment, they show us something deeply humbling, that heroism doesn't require intelligence. It requires heart. Let's go even deeper. House was a dog, genetically hardwired for loyalty. Binti was a gorilla, sharing 98% of our DNA. Is it any surprise they behaved like heroes? Maybe not. But then what about dolphins saving drowning humans, or elephants mourning humans they never knew, or whales lifting lost swimmers to the surface? Time after time, animals cross the line that separates them from us, not to harm, but to help. And they don't do it because they were taught. They do it because something inside them says, this is wrong. That being needs help. I will help them. And that is morality in its purest form. In the end, both House and Binti showed us what it truly means to be a protector, not just of their own kind, but of life itself. They didn't see species. They didn't see status. They saw someone who needed help, and they gave it with no expectation, no reward, just love. And that is a level of nobility we all should aspire to. Because sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes. They walk on 4 legs or knuckles, and they remind us that kindness isn't human, it's universal.